Here's a summary of The Picture of Dorian Gray by Oscar Wilde, along with key themes. Summary. The Picture of Dorian Gray is a novel by Oscar Wilde, first published in 1890. The story revolves around Dorian Gray, a handsome and charming young man in London. Dorian's portrait is painted by the talented artist Basil Hallward, and Dorian becomes friends with Lord Henry Wotton, a hedonistic and cynical aristocrat. As Dorian admires his portrait, he expresses a wish that he could remain forever young and that the portrait would age in his place. His wish is granted, and Dorian remains youthful and unspoiled, while the portrait ages and becomes a grotesque representation of his moral decay. Dorian begins a life of hedonism and moral corruption, influenced by Lord Henry, who encourages him to seek pleasure and disregard the consequences of his actions. Dorian engages in a series of immoral deeds, including seducing and then callously rejecting the actress Sybil Vane, leading to her suicide. Over the years, Dorian's portrait becomes increasingly monstrous as it bears the physical marks of his moral corruption. Dorian hides the portrait in his attic and continues his dissolute life. He becomes infamous for his cruelty and depravity, all the while maintaining his youthful and handsome appearance. The novel reaches its climax when Dorian, in a fit of rage and desperation, stabs the portrait in a bid to destroy the evidence of his sins. As a result, Dorian himself ages and withers away, ultimately dying as an old man with the portrait returning to its original state, revealing his true, monstrous self. Key themes. The nature of beauty. The Picture of Dorian Gray explores the idea of beauty and its corrupting influence. Dorian's desire for eternal youth and beauty leads to his moral downfall. Hedonism. The novel delves into the pursuit of pleasure and the consequences of a hedonistic lifestyle. Lord Henry's influence on Dorian encourages a life without moral restraint. Corruption and moral decay. The story highlights the moral decay of the protagonist as he becomes increasingly corrupt and cruel. The portrait acts as a visual representation of Dorian's moral deterioration. The influence of others. Lord Henry's influence on Dorian is a central theme, illustrating the power of external influences on an individual's character and choices. The double life. Dorian leads a double life, appearing virtuous and youthful on the outside while indulging in sinful and debauched behavior in secret. This duality is a central theme in the novel. Art and aesthetics. The novel explores the relationship between art and morality, particularly through the portrait, which acts as a reflection of Dorian's inner self. The consequences of vanity. Dorian's vanity and obsession with his own beauty lead to his downfall and ultimately to his death. The supernatural element. The supernatural element of the portrait aging while Dorian remains youthful adds an eerie and fantastical dimension to the story. Social and moral hypocrisy. The novel reveals the moral and social hypocrisy of the upper classes in Victorian society, who often concealed their own vices while condemning others for the same behavior. The power of influence. The novel explores the significant influence that friends and mentors can have on an individual's life choices and moral development. Lord Henry's influence on Dorian and Basil's influence on his art are prime examples. The artistic process. The novel delves into the artistic process and the relationship between the artist, Basil, and the subject, Dorian. It examines how art can capture and reflect the essence of a person. The suppression of guilt. Dorian tries to suppress his guilt by hiding the portrait and living a life of debauchery. This theme highlights the psychological consequences of repressing one's conscience. The conflict between good and evil. The story presents a profound exploration of the moral conflict within an individual. Dorian is torn between his desire for goodness and his pursuit of sinful pleasure. The portrait as a moral mirror. The portrait serves as a moral mirror, revealing the true nature of Dorian's character. This theme underscores the idea that one's actions are reflected in their appearance. The perils of narcissism. Dorian's excessive self-love and obsession with his own beauty lead to his ultimate downfall. The novel serves as a cautionary tale about the dangers of narcissism. The Picture of Dorian Gray is a novel that continues to captivate readers with its exploration of the corrupting influence of beauty, pleasure, and external influences on an individual's character and choices. It remains a classic work of literature with enduring relevance in discussions of morality and aestheticism.